My name is Olivia Parker. I am 30 years old. 4 years ago, I discovered the devastating truth while reviewing the books for my father's construction company that I had helped run for 11 years. He had taken out hidden loans totaling $1,800,000 along with back taxes and vendor debts, leaving the operation underwater by $400,000. I stayed silent and protected my separate inheritance and retirement savings in an irrevocable trust. That day, in the tense lawyer's office in Charlotte, my father was forcing me to sign over my shares and assets to him and my older brother to save the family legacy. My heart was pounding, but I had been ready for this moment, and I would let him take exactly what he demanded, no matter the cost. If you've ever felt like your own father saw you as disposable in the family business, hit that like button and tell me in the comments what your dad put you through. I read every single one. To understand how we got to that moment in the lawyer's office, I need to take you back. I grew up in Charlotte watching my father, George Parker, build Parker Construction, from a small crew of 5 into what everyone called a local success story. My mother, Patricia Parker, always said I was the practical one, while my older brother, Andrew Parker, was the visionary. I believed her. Right out of high school, I started working full-time for my father, handling the books, the client coordination, the permit filings, everything that kept the jobs moving. He never paid me what an outsider would have earned, but he promised me the company would be my future too one day. I believed that promise for 11 long years. The betrayal started on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon 4 years back. I was alone in the small office trailer at one of our job sites reconciling accounts when I noticed the pattern. Large transfers to accounts I had never seen. Lines of credit maxed out. Mortgages on equipment and properties that should have been paid off years earlier. I stayed up all night digging deeper, and the picture that emerged made my stomach turn. The business that everyone in Charlotte praised at Chamber of Commerce events was actually drowning. $1,800,000 in combined debt, with real asset value maybe $1,400,000 at best. The difference had vanished into bad investments, gambling losses, and lifestyle expenses my father never brought home. He had been living like a king on borrowed time, and I had been the one unknowingly helping him hide it. I did not confront him. I knew my father too well. He would have turned it around on me, called me dramatic or disloyal, and probably found a way to cut me out completely. Instead, I did what my late grandmother had taught me. I protected what was mine. I worked with a trusted personal advisor named Sophia Klein to move my separate inheritance and retirement savings into an irrevocable trust that neither my father nor anyone else could touch. It was for my future, not his. Then I documented everything, printed copies, stored them at my Aunt Elizabeth Cole's house, and waited. I smiled at family dinners, nodded along when my father bragged about his latest big project, and kept doing the work that kept his house of cards standing. For 4 years, I lived with that secret burning inside me. My father grew bolder. He started bringing my older brother, Andrew, into more decisions, pushing me to the side with little comments that stung. Olivia, you are great with the details, but the big picture needs a man's touch, he would say in front of clients, his voice dripping with that casual contempt he had perfected. My mother would laugh it off, and my older brother would smirk like it was all in good fun. I swallowed it every time. I told myself patience was my only weapon. Then, 3 months ago, the cracks became impossible to ignore. Creditors started calling the office. One vendor threatened to lien a job site. My father called an emergency family meeting at our lawyer Emma Sullivan's downtown office, claiming we needed to restructure the company shares to secure new financing. That meeting was supposed to be routine. It was not. My father walked in first, looking every bit the successful builder in his pressed polo and work boots. My mother followed, carrying her usual optimistic smile. My older brother arrived late, scrolling his phone like he already owned the place. My Aunt Elizabeth Cole was there too, invited by my father as a supposed neutral family voice. I sat across the long conference table, heart hammering but face calm. Emma Sullivan spread the documents out and explained the proposal in her careful, professional tone. My father wanted me to sign over my 25% ownership stake to my older brother immediately, no questions asked. In exchange, he said I could keep a small cash payout and step back from daily operations. He framed it as doing me a favor. "You have given enough, Olivia," my father said, leaning forward with that fatherly smile that never reached his eyes. "Let your older brother take the lead. Women your age should be thinking about settling down, not stressing over concrete pours and subcontractor drama. This is for the best." The words landed like a slap, but I kept my expression soft, defeated. My mother nodded along, murmuring something about how proud she was of me for being reasonable. My older brother did not even look up from his phone, but I caught the satisfied curl at the corner of his mouth. My Aunt Elizabeth Cole shifted in her seat and gave me a quick, sympathetic glance, but said nothing. Emma Sullivan cleared her throat and slid a second set of papers across the table. These were the full liability disclosures. My father had not expected me to have them ready. His face tightened for half a second before he recovered. Later that same afternoon, back at the office trailer, my father pulled me aside while the others waited in the parking lot. His face was flushed with victory. "See, that was not so hard, was it? You always were the dramatic one, but deep down you know your place." The sarcasm in his voice was unmistakable, the long-held resentment finally bubbling up. He clapped me on the shoulder like we were partners and walked out whistling. I stood there alone, staring at the stacks of folders that represented 12 years of my life, and wondered if protecting my own money was worth the silence that was about to swallow my family whole. 2 weeks passed in a blur of quiet preparations. I met with Sophia Klein again to confirm the trust was untouched. She warned me that my father might try to challenge it once the debt surfaced, but the paperwork was airtight. Meanwhile, my father and my older brother started announcing their big plans around town, new projects, new equipment, as if the money was already secured. My mother called me every few days with cheerful updates about how proud she was of the boys for stepping up. My Aunt Elizabeth Cole texted me privately, once asking if I was really okay with all of this. I told her I was fine because admitting the truth would have unraveled everything I had built in secret. Then the first creditor call came to the main office line while I was still listed as the bookkeeper. The vendor was furious, demanding immediate payment on an overdue invoice I knew my father had ignored for months. I transferred the call to him and listened through the speaker as he blustered and promised payment was coming. When he hung up, he looked at me with fresh irritation. "Handle these people, Olivia. That is still your job for now." That night at a family dinner, my father raised his glass to the future of Parker Construction. My older brother grinned like he had earned it all himself. My mother beamed. My Aunt Elizabeth Cole watched me across the table with quiet concern. I smiled back at them, all the perfect supportive daughter. But under the table, my hands were clenched so tight my nails left marks in my palms. I knew the avalanche was coming. I just did not know that when it hit, my father would find a way to make me the one who looked like the villain. The dinner ended with my father pulling me aside again, his voice low and cutting. "Do not get any ideas about changing your mind on those papers. You signed them fair and square. This family does not need another problem. His eyes held mine a second too long, the contempt clear. I nodded, but inside something shifted. The patience I had held for 4 years was starting to crack, and I wondered if I had waited too long. The next morning, the second creditor notice arrived by certified mail at the office. This one was bigger, a bank threatening foreclosure on a piece of equipment worth more than my annual salary. My father stormed into my workspace, slamming the letter down. "Fix this, Olivia. You are the one who knows the numbers." His words were laced with blame, as if I had created the mess. My older brother walked in right behind him and added his own jab. "Yeah, sis, do not drop the ball now." I felt the familiar sting, but this time it mixed with a cold certainty. The meeting at Emma Sullivan's office had been the beginning. The real storm was just starting to build, and I was no longer sure I could walk away clean. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Sophia Klein, with one line that made my blood run cold. "We need to talk about the trust immediately. Something has come up." I stepped outside the office trailer into the late afternoon heat and called her right back, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Sophia answered on the first ring, her voice tight in a way that told me this was not going to be good news. She explained that my father had quietly filed paperwork through his associate Christopher Reed to challenge the trust, claiming I had used company resources to set it up years earlier. It was a long shot, but it meant court dates, depositions, and legal fees that could drain everything I had left if I fought it publicly. My father had initiated the move himself without a single warning, the same man who had just patted me on the shoulder like we were still a team. I barely had time to process before my father called me back into the trailer, his face already set in that familiar mix of authority and resentment. He did not even wait for me to sit down. "Olivia, your little side moves are causing problems again," he said, his voice low and sharp like a blade sliding across concrete. Christopher Reed was standing right behind him, nodding along with a folder in his hands. My father had brought him in deliberately to witness this moment. "You think you can hide money from your own family after everything we poured into you? Sign the additional disclosure today, or I will make sure the whole town knows how ungrateful you really are." The words hit hard because they came straight from him, the first real accusation that I was the problem, not the debts he had created. My mother had arrived by then, and she jumped in with her usual forced brightness, but it only made the knife twist deeper. "Your father is only trying to protect us all, dear," she said, patting my arm like I was still 12 years old. That evening, my older brother texted the family group insisting we all meet for dinner at our usual spot downtown to celebrate the share transfer. My father led the conversation the moment we sat down, his eyes locked on me across the table. He raised his glass first and then turned the toast into something else entirely. "To the future of Parker Construction," he said, "and to the daughter who finally stepped aside like she should have years ago." My mother smiled and nodded, my older brother chuckled under his breath, and Christopher Reed, who my father had invited as a special guest, leaned back with a satisfied grin. I felt the heat rise in my face, but I kept quiet. My father was not done. He leaned forward, his voice carrying just enough for the nearby tables to hear. "You know, Olivia, some people would call what you tried with that trust sneaky, but I raised you better than that. Or at least I thought I did." The sarcasm dripped from every syllable, the long-held contempt, finally out in the open for everyone, including my Aunt Elizabeth Cole, who had joined us at the last minute. My Aunt Elizabeth tried to speak up gently, suggesting we keep the conversation private, but my father cut her off with a single sharp look. "This is family business, Elizabeth, and Olivia needs to hear it." He turned back to me. You owe this company more than some hidden account. My mother added her own layer right after his words. We have always supported you, honey, even when you made things harder than they needed to be. My older brother piled on next, though my father had started it all. Yeah, sis, stop acting like the victim. Christopher Reed watched the whole exchange without saying a word, but his silence felt like approval. I sat there swallowing every insult, letting it burn, because fighting back now would only give my father more ammunition for his trust challenge. The dinner ended with my father sliding another set of papers across the table, demanding I sign them in front of everyone. Sign it, Olivia, he said, his eyes boring into mine. Prove you are still part of this family. I signed with a steady hand, but inside I was reeling. Too many cliffhangers had already hit that day, the trust threat and the public shaming, and I knew the worst was still coming. The next morning, creditors started calling my personal cell because my father had given them my number himself. One vendor screamed at me for 10 minutes straight about an unpaid invoice of nearly $200,000, while my father stood in the doorway of my workspace listening with a smirk. When I hung up, he stepped inside and closed the door. See what happens when you try to protect yourself instead of the family, he said, his tone laced with that same biting resentment. Christopher Reed poked his head in right then, and my father waved him over. Tell her, Chris. Tell her how this looks to our partners. Christopher Reed cleared his throat and repeated the line my father had clearly fed him. It looks like disloyalty, Olivia. Like you are bailing while the rest of us sink. Bawiyaan. My Aunt Elizabeth Cole called me later that afternoon after hearing about the dinner from my mother. She sounded worried and asked if I wanted to meet at her house to talk things through away from my father. I agreed because I needed one person who was not completely under his spell. When I got there, she poured coffee and listened while I finally let some of the truth spill out about the hidden debts and the years of quiet work I had done for free. My Aunt Elizabeth shook her head slowly. Your father has always been like this, she said, but I never thought he would turn on you this way. She offered to speak to him herself, but I begged her not to because I knew he would twist it into more proof that I was causing drama. Still, her support gave me a small breath of air until my phone rang again. It was Sophia Klein with an update that dropped like a hammer. Your father has escalated, she said. He has a hearing scheduled in 3 weeks. The pressure built fast after that. My father started showing up at the office every morning with new demands, and each one began with his voice cutting through the air first. Olivia, I need you to transfer these vendor payments from your personal account, he announced one day in front of my colleague who had stopped by to drop off files. When I reminded him I had no such obligation, his face hardened. You will do it because I said so. Your mother and older brother agree it is only fair after the mess you helped create by not speaking up sooner. My mother called me that same night to reinforce his words, her tone sweet but firm. Your father is under so much stress, dear. Just help him this once and everything will calm down. I felt the walls closing in, the trust that was supposed to be my safety net now hanging by a thread because of the legal challenge he had launched without ever discussing it with me. 3 days later, my older brother cornered me at a job site while my father watched from the truck. My father had sent him deliberately. Sis, you need to stop fighting this, he said, echoing the exact phrasing my father had used earlier that morning. Dad is right, you are making us all look bad. Christopher Reed was there too, nodding along as if he had been coached. I tried to walk away, but my father called out from across the lot, his voice loud enough for the crew to hear. Olivia, get back here and act like you care about this family for once. The humiliation burned, but I turned around because walking away would only give him more fuel for the hearing. That night, I sat in my small apartment staring at the trust documents Sophia Klein had sent over and realized the painful truth starting to form. If I fought my father in court, I might win the money, but I would lose the last shred of family I had left. If I let him take what he wanted, I would lose everything I had protected for 4 years. The choice was coming faster than I could prepare for, and my father was the one forcing my hand every single step of the way. My Aunt Elizabeth tried one more time to intervene by inviting the whole family over for a casual barbecue, hoping the relaxed setting would soften things. It backfired. My father used the gathering to launch into another round of public pressure right after we finished eating. He stood up with his plate still in hand and looked straight at me. Olivia, I have given you every chance to do the right thing. He said, his words sharp and deliberate. But if you keep hiding behind that trust, we will have no choice but to cut you out completely. My mother sighed and looked away. My older brother smirked, and Christopher Reed chuckled like it was all just business. My Aunt Elizabeth looked horrified, but my father kept going. You always thought you were smarter than the rest of us with your little secret savings. The resentment in his voice was raw and unmistakable, the kind that had been building for years. I sat there feeling the final mini cliffhanger settle over me like a weight, because the next morning Sophia Klein was scheduled to meet me with the latest court filing, and I already knew it would contain something devastating. The next morning, I drove straight to Sophia Klein's office with my stomach in knots. She closed the door behind me and slid the latest court filing across her desk, her face grim. Your father has managed to get a temporary injunction, she said quietly. Christopher Reed found some old emails that suggest you used company time to set up the trust. It is a stretch, but the judge is ordering a full audit, and if we fight, it could take 18 months and cost over $150,000 in legal fees. My father had initiated the motion himself, signing every page with that same bold handwriting I had seen on 1,000 invoices. Sophia leaned back. The choice is yours, Olivia, but if you settle now, you might keep a small portion. Otherwise, he could drag this out until there's nothing left. I left her office feeling like the ground had shifted under me. My phone rang before I even reached my car. It was my father. Olivia, I know you just left your little advisor's office, he said, his voice sharp and triumphant as if he had been tracking my every move. Come to the office now. We are having a family meeting, and this time you will listen. No more games. When I walked in, the conference room was already full. My mother sat beside him, looking tired but loyal. My older brother leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. Christopher Reed had his notebook open like he was there in an official capacity. Even my Aunt Elizabeth Cole had been summoned, though she gave me a small, encouraging nod. My father did not waste a second. He stood up the moment I sat down, his eyes locking onto mine with that cold resentment he no longer bothered to hide. You have caused enough trouble, Olivia. He started, his tone cutting straight through the room. Hiding money using company resources, trying to play the victim while the rest of us fight to keep this business alive. Your mother and I raised you better than this. My mother nodded quickly, adding her own layer. Your father is right, dear. We have always put family first. My older brother jumped in right after him. Yeah, sis, stop making Dad the bad guy. Christopher Reed cleared his throat and read from his notes exactly the way my father had coached him. The filing shows clear misuse of resources. My father leaned across the table, his voice dropping to that sarcastic bite I had come to dread. Sign the settlement today, or watch me take every penny in court. You owe us this, Olivia, after everything we gave you." The words landed like blows because they came from him first every single time the resentment he had carried for years finally weaponized. My Aunt Elizabeth tried to speak up gently, suggesting we take a breath, but my father shut her down with one sharp glare. "This is between me and my daughter Elizabeth. Stay out of it." I felt the air leave the room. Two mini cliffhangers hit at once, the injunction and the public demand, in front of everyone I loved. I looked at their faces. My mother's quiet agreement, my older brother's smirk, Christopher Reed's professional detachment, and my aunt's helpless worry, and something inside me broke. Fighting would destroy what little family I had left. Letting go would destroy me. My father slid the settlement papers across the table, his eyes daring me to refuse. I picked up the pen, my hand trembling for the first time in 4 years. In that moment, I made the painful choice. I signed away 70% of the trust to settle the challenge and avoid the long court battle. The remaining 30% was barely enough to cover basic living expenses while I figured out my next steps. My father watched every stroke of the pen, his face softening into something almost like victory. "Good girl," he said quietly, the sarcasm gone, replaced by cold satisfaction. "See, that was not so hard. You finally did the right thing for once." My mother reached over and squeezed my shoulder, murmuring how proud she was. My older brother clapped me on the back like we were suddenly teammates again. Christopher Reed gathered the papers with a nod of approval. My Aunt Elizabeth Cole looked at me with quiet sadness but said nothing more. The business did not collapse the way I had once hoped it would. My father spun the settlement as smart restructuring told everyone in Charlotte that his daughter had finally stepped up. Creditors were paid just enough to keep the doors open. New loans were secured on the back of the family's renewed unity. Parker Construction limped forward under his control and my older brother's growing role. I was quietly removed from the payroll 2 weeks later with a single line in an email from my father. "It is best for everyone, Olivia. No hard feelings." My mother called once or twice after that, her voice bright but distant, asking if I had found a new job yet. My older brother never reached out again. Christopher Reed sent one final document confirming the trust adjustment and then disappeared from my life. Even my Aunt Elizabeth's texts grew shorter over the months as the family narrative settled into place, that I had been the one who almost ruined everything but finally came around. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of Charlotte with the little money I had left. I found work as a bookkeeper for a small landscaping company, nothing like the construction world I had given 12 years to. Some nights I sat on my second-hand couch staring at the single box of documents I had kept, the ones that proved every debt my father had hidden, and wondered what would have happened if I had fought harder. The regret sat heavy in my chest like an anchor I could never quite lift. My father had won. He kept the company, the reputation, the control. I had chosen the lesser evil to preserve some shred of peace, but all it left me with was silence, and the knowledge that I had let him take exactly what he demanded one more time. The family dinners continued without me. The holidays passed with polite texts from my mother and nothing from the rest. I was free in the smallest possible way, but the cost had been everything I once believed I could protect. A year later, I heard through my Aunt Elizabeth that the business was still struggling, but my father had managed to refinance again, blaming old mistakes on bad timing. He never once acknowledged what he had done. The last time I saw him was at a neutral coffee shop where my mother had begged me to show up for her sake. He sat across from me in his usual polo shirt, looking every bit the successful builder, and said with that same sharp edge I remember so well, "Glad you finally grew up, Olivia. Family means putting others first." I did not answer. I just stood up, paid for my own coffee, and walked out into the Charlotte afternoon, feeling the full weight of the defeat I had chosen. It was not the ending I had planned 4 years earlier, but it was the one I had signed for with my own hand. Some lessons come too late, and some fathers never change. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to choose between fighting your father and losing the last piece of yourself just to keep some kind of peace, tell me in the comments what you decided and how it still sits with you today. I read every single one,